Thank you for watching Virginia This Morning live right here on CBS 6. In relationship, there's communication, and then there's effective communication. How do you rate your communication skills? Our next guest says it's something that takes a lot of work, but once you apply these 5 principles, you can actually strengthen relationships. Joining us with more is our great friend of the show, former United States Marine and mental toughness expert Eric Rittmeyer, who joins us live. Eric, always a delight to see you.
Likewise, Jess, and I got to go back on the hair thing real quick. I'm an 80s baby. You didn't know this. The mullets were in, but now today's phrase for it, it's called lettuce. Just so you know, I'll save you some Google time. It's called lettuce.
Ooh, how, what? Like, okay, but we can't talk about that right now. I'm so curious. Like, that opens up such a big can of worms that I want to get into. But first, we're going to learn effective communication. And Eric, you've got 5 steps, 5 tips for us to take, which it's great to wrap your arms around them, but they do require a little thinking. Let's get started with number 1.
Yeah, this is the most important one, Jess, and this is the issue. It's just we're allowed to feel, okay? We have to give ourselves, authorization to feel, especially men. This is a problem. A lot of men try to shut the feelings off. We're emotional creatures. We're hardwired to feel first and think later. We're going to experience emotions. We have to realize that 100% of what we're feeling is okay. It's how we respond to those things that's so important. It starts with just giving ourselves to say, okay, it's all right that I'm feeling this way. I'm human.
And I want to take this from the positive spin. When you allow yourself to feel, you're also not approaching that conversation as though you're trying to defend something. Like, I really do feel this way. Like, if you allow yourself to feel, maybe you're coming in with a more positive mindset.
You're absolutely correct, right? And again, emotion and logic are inversely related. So as we become more emotional, we become less logical. It's important to identify that feeling and then allow ourselves. Again, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to cry. It's okay to do all these things. It's remaining in control of it, understanding why we're feeling it, and then properly communicating it.
Eric, it's funny because you need to take time to identify what you're feeling too, because you go into with great feelings and pretty emotional about things, but it's helpful to sort of figure out and get to the bottom of what that feeling is.
I call these emotional tornadoes, Jess, and this is where it's just this tornado, picture a tornado. It's all these feelings. We don't know what's real. We don't know what's concrete. We don't know what's fleeting. So we have to start with stepping back and trying to get hold of those feelings and saying, okay, why am I feeling this way? And you really do want to try to identify those feelings, because before you articulate that to your spouse, to your friend, to your coworker, to whoever, you want to make sure it's not fueled 100% in emotion, because if it is, you're probably going to say and do things you're going to regret. General rule of thumb.
Now, Eric, if you're not necessarily comfortable going into a conversation, sharing, and communicating your feelings, do you have like a tiny, booster tip on wrapping your arms around that?
Yeah, I think it really starts with, Jess, is understanding that we all have these feelings, and feelings that we have, other people are probably feeling the same way. It's okay to be vulnerable. We should be vulnerable. There's a way, though, that we have to kind of take a step back and say, okay, should I be sharing this? Should I not be sharing this? And I think it all starts with getting control of our emotions. So we're better able to respond to situations, which is going to be logic-based, as opposed to reacting, which is emotion-based. But it starts with just relying on these friendships we have, these relationships we have, and understand that other people probably feel the same way, and they're probably going to appreciate that we're really telling them how we feel.
Makes sense. As we shift gears into tip number 3, what are you sharing?
Yes, start internally. Start with yourself. Again, take that step back and just say, okay, why am I feeling? How am I feeling? What's causing this? Am I really going to go at this person the way I should go at them? But start internally, and this is called metacognition. This is where we analyze our thoughts. We think about what we're thinking about. I know it sounds hairy-fairy like unicorns and stuff, but you're thinking about what you're thinking about. Start internally, recognize it, acknowledge it, and then find a way to sit down with someone, talk to them, and explain it in a way that they're not going to get defensive, you're not going to get defensive. It's just a friendship that you're taking to a next level.
It makes sense. And take a minute to just process the situation before you dive in. It'll give you a little greater clarity on what you are feeling. When you're doing that and giving yourself a little time, you want to also make sure that you're taking yourself into account. Now, this might sound counterintuitive, right?
It does, yes. And again, this goes back to relying on our relationships. Start internally and realize that the person we're communicating with cares about us. They don't want any ill harm done to us. They don't want to say mean things. I mean, some people do, obviously, in those relationships we got to be careful with. But if it's a true friend-to-friend relationship, coworkers, everybody innately cares about each other. So start internally, recognize how we feel, and say, you know what? I appreciate this person, I respect this person. When I share these things, it's very likely they're going to reciprocate. That's human nature. Nobody really dislikes anybody. We're just taught to dislike people, right? So share things with people and realize that at the end of the day, they probably feel the same way we feel.
It's all so much to consider, Eric, and I have a question about coworkers, but before we get to that, I want to get to tip number 5.
Yes. Replace you with I. Okay, so here's the thing. You got to be really careful with this. Or I should say, replace I with you. When we get into these situations, a lot of times we go into them and say, you did this, you did that, you made me feel this way. We have to back off of that and replace it with, I feel this way. This is how I feel. We don't want to go into these situations defensive. And a lot of times, again, because it's fueled in emotion, we don't have control of the emotion. We go into it automatically wanting to point the finger at the other person, as opposed to saying, I feel this way. This is why I feel this way. This is how I feel. This is what caused it. It's just a matter of, again, looking internally. It's an introspective process as opposed to trying to push it off on somebody else.
Okay, that makes sense. You know, we're all probably heading back into workspaces again. That's going to start shifting. This communication skill set is probably more important than ever. But one thing that we're not used to doing, at least for many of us, is feelings, emotions, and having these kind of conversations in the workplace. How do those two go together?
Yes, this all starts at the core of all this, Jess. The takeaway from all this is we have to get better at listening. Okay, as a society, we've gotten to the point where we listen with the intent to reply, not with the intent to understand. So as we're listening to somebody talk in our mind, we're listening just enough to formulate our response. Once we have that response, normally what happens is everything that person says after that is just Charlie Brown talk. And then we wait for that millisecond break in conversation. We go back with the response. Then they talk again. We listen just long enough to reply. So we have to get a lot better at listening truly with the intent to understand people.
Wah, 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 on deeper listening. Yes. Good. It makes sense when you slow down, take a moment, and really fully appreciate bringing yourself and those feelings and listening to the table. It can make all the difference. Great talking with you, Eric. Thank you.
Likewise, Jess. Awesome seeing you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. For more information, we'll have a link on our show website by early this afternoon, WTVR.com/VTM. We'll open up the inbox here in just a little bit, featuring a few submissions that came in over the weekend in our Everywhere You Are feature. That's coming up in less than 3 minutes.